This is a bonus episode of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Now, what is this bonus episode about? Well, it is the election night coverage, but fear not. I'm not just going to go over clips of people on Fox gloating about the win of Trump's win. I also covered the PBS News Hour. So this is going to be a comparison of how these two networks covered the same event. And I'm going to go back and forth hour by hour through this whole thing. Fox gave me roughly 9.5 hours. PBS gave me about 8.5 hours. And we're going to do a direct comparison of how they handled this event. There are some funny clips in here. I purposely found clips that aren't, it's basically just showing Fox for their true colors. I will say this, one thing that was very surprising. There was not a lot of joy during the Fox News coverage, except for like Sean Hannity, which is obvious. But among the legit news team, there seemed to be a level of dread. Now, they would deny it. They say, what are you kidding? I noticed it. And I think it's because Trump has openly attacked people who work on the legit news team of Fox. And that would be Brett Baer and Martha McCallum. He's called them out by name. Like he said, they shouldn't be hosting the debates. We should have Jesse Waters do it, who would, be kind of an idiot. But Trump has said that. So I don't think they're looking forward to 4 more years of chaos. I don't think they are, especially when Donald J. Trump might be gunning for their jobs. So it was subtle, but I did notice a dread, which was interesting. I did not expect to see that. The folks at PBS were incredibly professional that they didn't show bias, except for the people who were obviously Democrats, who were there to be Democrats, like the Democratic strategist. And then, Jonathan Capehart is very obviously left-wing. He was, he expressed his thoughts. But even, we'll get into it. David Brooks, who's more, right-leaning, he expressed some concerns. Now, those are the pundits, so it's okay that they say that. But nobody who works for a PBS as a journalist was openly upset or openly showing deference towards Kamala Harris. They were utmost professional. And you'll see that in the clips. Another thing that I'm not going to do in this broadcast is we're not going to go state by state, who got what, when they got what, who cares? We know how that went down. I'm also not going to do an analysis of what the Democratic Party did wrong or what Harris Walz did wrong or what I would think they should do in the future. That is not my expertise. I don't feel qualified talking about that. I honestly don't know. I would recommend Pod Save America did a great episode on this, and I would say the person to really listen to is Dan Pfeiffer. In that episode, he's the person that has the polling experience. He's also the oldest person in the group. And yeah, I'm showing a little deference to my own people here, Gen X. But he, I assume he's Gen X. I think he's a few years older than me. Not much. We're close in age. But he just had the best insight. He's also an early adopter to Decoding Fox News. I have no idea if he still listens, but he was one of the first people that was sort of like a name that popped up in my subscribers list, and I almost fell over. But again, I have no idea. I've never talked to him about this or anything, so I have no idea if he's still a supporter or not. But he was at one time. He might still be. I don't know. It's all good. But he did have the best insight. So look for that, Pod Save America. They made it right after the election. It's probably published that Wednesday. I wanted to wait to give people some breathing room. And because I'm not talking about like what people did wrong, I'm not a huge fan of that. This was such an unprecedented situation where we had Trump running again, which is bizarre already. That's only happened one time before that a candidate was successful doing that. And it's very unusual. We've never had anybody like Trump I think ever in the history of the country besides Trump. And then the situation with Biden and his age and all of this is just bizarro. This was such a strange year. I'm not going to break it down. I'm not going to waste your time. I don't know enough. I just would feel stupid doing that. So I'm going to focus on what I do, which is fact-checking and calling out propaganda. So again, we're going to go back and forth between PBS and Fox. So don't worry, that'll take the edge off. And right now, if you're listening to my voice, I have the full commitment from here on out until we're finally past this nightmare, which hopefully we will be past this nightmare, that I will do everything in my power to fight back against this monster. I will fact check Fox. I will, hold their feet to the fire. I have a feeling some of this stuff with Trump, he's going to go too far and it's going to implode. He and Elon Musk might be at each other's throats in 6 months, in a month. Who knows? I don't know. I have some faith in the system. Not much, but I have some faith in the system. And just know that when we all found out that Harris didn't win, my first gut instinct is, let's get to work. So you know that I'm going to be working incredibly hard to do my very best. And that's all I want to say. And very quickly before I because I don't want to interrupt this, if you want to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you can go to my Substack at Decoding Fox News, my Patreon at Decoding Fox News. I have a linked tree at the top of my bio at Twitter, also known as X. They send you to my Venmo. I'm going to probably move that over to Blue Sky because I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm also on Threads. And that's about it. I am 100% supported if you're a new listener. I have no large donor. I have no rich parents. I have no sponsor. I have no advertisers. I am 100% funded by people who listen to this podcast and read my newsletter. And that is it. So no one's pulling my puppet strings. I'm completely 100% independent. Normally, Decoding Fox News podcasts are about 45 minutes, 50 minutes long. This is probably going to go a little bit longer. Probably won't be as long as the Madison Square Garden because it's just, there's not as much to cover, but it's a lot of clips. But let's just start with this. Each hour is going to have a label. And the first hour was called Bomb Threats and Trump's Lies. And I'm going to describe the layout for Fox. They started with Bret Baier as a co-anchor, Martha McCallum as a co-anchor. They had Sandra Smith working this board that was called the Fox News Voter Analysis. We also had an election map that Bill Hemmer was doing. They had a lot of bells and whistles and fancy sound effects and graphics over at Fox. PBS did not. I preferred PBS's way because, who cares? We don't need all these graphics and bells and whistles, but Fox was all about showing that off. The main panel that stayed there for most of the night was Brett Hume of Fox News, Dana Perino, Fox News, Harold Ford Jr., he's a moderate, would not call him a liberal. Karl Rove, Fox News, he's also a Republican. He's got a long history with the Republican Party. Kellyanne Conway, Fox News, she's also former Trump administration. The guests in the first hour were Robert Wolf of the Obama Foundation, Representative Kevin McCarthy, he's a Republican from California, former Speaker of the House, Shannon Bream, she was sort of like a legal expert of Fox News, and Carrie Urban. She's also Fox News, former Trump administration. She was also part of this legal team. So here's the first clip, and this is my favorite person from Fox News. So trust me, I got the good clips, guys. We're not going to be listening to them celebrating for this was 9 hours, remember. We're not going to be listening to that, but this is Eric Shawn. He's been featured before on Decoding Fox News. He is a deadpan, legit news reporter for Fox, and he has a way of sort of just sticking it into Trump's heart without really being too obvious about it. So here's Eric Shawn.
Eric? Good evening, Brett. Well, it is a day that America votes, and officials say that the process, now it's largely going smoothly, but they say there are some sporadic incidents. In Michigan, 2 people were arrested for making election threats. One against former President Trump and Christian conservatives. Another one charged with targeting a Democratic organization. The FBI also says false bomb threats in Georgia originated with a Russian email address. The Bureau also warning about fake videos on social media. One telling voters to cast ballots remotely because of a supposed high terrorist threat. Another claim that there's voter fraud at prisons. All not true, says the Bureau tonight. And former President Trump on Truth Social claims there is, quote, a lot of talk about massive cheating in Philadelphia. Law enforcement coming. But Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner responds to that, saying, quote, the only talk about massive cheating has come from one of the candidates, Donald J. Trump. There is no factual basis whatsoever within law enforcement to support this wild allegation. If Donald J. Trump has any facts to support his wild allegations, we want them now. Right now. We are not holding our breath. And the Republican city commissioner there also says that claim by the former president is not true. He calls it disinformation. And disinformation does continue to pop up on social media. One Pennsylvania viewer alerted us to a Facebook post that appeared to show a ballot that already had a small mark in the box for Harris. The viewer feared his Trump vote would not be counted. We traced that alleged ballot to Kentucky, where the Secretary of State's office told us that the ballot is an apparent fake. So the lesson from all this, they say, be careful of what you read on social media.
So again, that was on Fox News. That was not PBS. That was Fox News. Eric Shawn just eviscerating some of this nonsense. I did sense a very subtle mutiny of sorts among the legit news team. Now, Trump, and we'll get into this later, because this is addressed later, that day, that morning, openly attacked Fox News, saying that they weren't loyal enough to him. They weren't, kind enough to him. And he has attacked by name Martha MacCallum. He has said when he, at one point he came on Fox and Friends and he said, oh, if you do another presidential debate on Fox, I don't want them hosting it. And he meant Brent Baier and Martha MacCallum, and he called them out by name. I know he said Martha MacCallum. I'm not sure if he said Brett, but he did say Martha MacCallum. She's, again, on the legit news team at Fox News. So we don't know what's been going on behind the scenes because Trump has met with Rupert Murdoch. They did discuss. Fox has been issuing very clear, Trump did not win the 2020 election. They're trying to sort of rein this in a little bit with this disinformation and this nonsense. And I did sense there was not a lot of joy when Trump won. I did not see that on Fox. I saw that the next day on The Five. I saw it the next day on Fox and Friends. I didn't see it this night, which was an interesting, subtle layer that I was very surprised to actually see, because I think the legit news team is sick of this man. So next up, we have a clip. I should describe PBS. I won't have to do this for every hour. So PBS News Hour, hosted by Jeff Bennett, co-anchor of the PBS News Hour. Amna Nawaz, also co-anchor of the PBS News Hour. Those two were sort of at the helm, in charge. They had a giant desk. At the election map, they had Lisa Desjardins. She's one of the main correspondents. At the panel, they had, and this pretty much didn't change. They had a few additions throughout the broadcast. Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. Kevin Madden, a Republican strategist. Faz Shakir, a Democratic strategist. He's worked with Bernie Sanders. David Brooks, the New York Times. Jonathan Capehart of Washington Post, and Judy Woodruff, the legend. Also, she used to be the main host of the PBS News Hour. For the first hour, they also added an additional guest, which was Representative Tom Cole, a Republican of Indiana. And he's, of course, an elected official. And I just pointing out all these guests to show that PBS was going out of its way to sort of show both sides, to be as balanced as possible. So this is William Brangham, and he was reporting from the Trump campaign party in West Palm Beach, Florida. And he's also going to bring up disinformation. Here we go.
The second concern that's been raised about this relationship is that Elon Musk has been, similar to Donald Trump, putting out some of the most debunked and repeated false allegations about voter fraud and cheating in this election. And there's all this ongoing question as to whether or not Donald Trump, if, let's say, this does not go for him tonight or in the days coming, whether or not he will concede the election if it is fair. And Trump was asked this when he went to vote today in West Palm Beach and said, yes, if it's fair, I will. But in the hours since, he has continued to promote baseless claims that there is cheating in the swing states, particularly in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And having Elon Musk sitting next to him, who has been parroting those same claims on the enormous social media platform that he owns, X, makes a lot of people wonder whether or not Trump will in fact honor the outcome of this election. So
yeah, PBS is calling balls and strikes. They're not holding back. There's no They're not normalizing this either. So we're moving on to hour 2, which I labeled Long Lines and Trump Lies. We're still talking about Trump lies again. So here we go. They added to the panel at Fox, Laura Ingraham of Fox News, and again, Robert Wolf of the Obama Foundation. He didn't always come back. Some people would go in and out. So this first quote is from Laura Ingraham, and she's talking about long lines. And I thought this was an interesting thing to say.
The Appalachian State, the polling place in Boone County, they're saying schools in Pennsylvania and Nevada are huge lines. They're mobilizing young people. That's what they're sending out, at least now. What do you think?
15 polling places in Georgia have had to have extended hours because of that bomb threat that you guys were reporting on earlier, various bomb threats. And in Georgia, it's DeKalb County, Gwinnett, other key population centers. Will that affect the ultimate result in a place like Georgia? We'll find out. But Donald Trump this morning in West Palm Beach looked into the camera and he said, "Stay in line." Like it took him a while to sort of ask for people's votes over this campaign season.
Twitter tonight, he's still up on X saying, "Stay in line."
Yeah, stay in line. Don't get out of the line, because Harris supporters were reporting in Pennsylvania, Lehigh University students, that they waited in line for 6 hours to vote. 6 hours, and that was confirmed by a bunch of other reporting. So people have to, a lot of people can't wait in line for that long. And so that could end up being something that both parties complain about in the end. But, we'll see.
So I thought that was interesting, considering Laura Ingraham was pointing out that college students were having 6-hour-long lines. And we all pretty much know how college students are probably more likely to vote for Harris. So I just thought that was interesting. And yeah, people can't wait 6 hours in line. Obnoxious. So next up we have PBS, and they had an additional guest, same exact panel. They added Marcia Fudge. She came in and spoke briefly. She works with the Harris-Walz campaign. She's a long history of the Democratic Party. And this quote is from John Yang. He's a PBS correspondent. He was reporting from Allegheny County, Pennsylvania.
Back to you, John.
And John, in the meantime, I understand Donald Trump has been making unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud in and around Philadelphia. Bring us up to speed and give us a fact check.
He went on social media earlier this afternoon, said that there was massive fraud or massive cheating, is his words, going on in Philadelphia, and that law enforcement was on the way. The first denial I saw came from Seth Bluestein. Who's Seth Bluestein? He's a Republican city commissioner in the city of Philadelphia. He said there's no substance to it, and that he has been in touch with the RNC all day to assure them and reassure them that things are going smoothly in Philadelphia and that the vote is safe and sound.
So in hour one, Fox addressed it. Hour two, PBS addressed basically the same thing. Now, PBS will not let up on this. They keep talking about Trump's lies and this disinformation throughout the rest of the broadcast, whereas Fox News completely dropped it. Now, moving on to hour three, which I have called GOP delusions. Fox added some people to the panel. They were constantly rotating people out. I have no idea how the folks at PBS went to the bathroom, or they were because they don't have commercials on PBS. And I was sitting there after I was watching this for hours. I went, they have no break. They have no break. How are they functioning? You can't do this for 9 hours and not have a break. This is nuts. No commercials. They had some cutaways where they had breaks for independent stations. I guess that's when they were running to the bathroom. I have no idea. Anyway, just pointing that out, how nuts this is. But so for the additional panel members, we had Jessica Tarloff, Fox News liberal. Then they brought on Jesse Waters, and he just kind of sat there. He didn't hardly say anything. And then they had this thing called the business panel, which was 4 people. Maria Bartiromo, Fox News. Kevin O'Leary, he's a Canadian businessman and investor. He's known for working with Shark Tank. Larry Kudlow of Fox Business. He's also former Trump administration. And Charles Payne, also of Fox Business. Now, this is an interesting twist. This was Brit Hume claiming that Donald J. Trump was politically victimized by January 6th. I am not making this up. This is a bizarre twist. One of my favorite clips of the night, because I'm like, really? Really? We're doing this, Brit Hume. Brit Hume is a stalwart. He's been with Fox News for ages. He is around Biden's age. I think they're 6 months apart or something. I looked it up at one point. They're very close in age. And I'm only pointing that out because he talks about Biden's age all the time, which I'm like, really? I don't know if I would be doing that. Look in the mirror. But anyway, so here's the clip.
If you work your way back to what that's about January 6th.
Can I clarify
and the
something?
price he paid politically for January 6th is is still being paid.
And it also was hammered over and over again by current President Biden, the former candidate. You know, the threat to democracy was really on his lips pretty much every minute.
And Vice President Harris didn't take that ball for a lot, but she did come back to it towards the end of the campaign.
The other thing about it I think is striking is it shows you the power of the media, because in many ways it's a BS issue when you think about it. I mean, think about it, go back to January 6th, which was supposed to be the moment when we all thought we should fear this, that our democracy was fragile. It was the premise of the January 6th special committee that we, as the co-chairman of the committee put it, we came critically close to losing our democracy. It's ridiculous. I mean, that our democracy is pretty sturdy. Our checks and balances worked. The thing was over in a matter of hours, and yet here we are. It's still a factor.
And here we are.
So that is just outrageous, what he just said. Just completely downplaying what happened. To remind Mr. Hume, within 36 hours of the attack on January 6th, 6 people died. And at least 140 police officers were injured, some with life-altering injuries, meaning they will never be the same again. The rioters also came dangerously close to physically harming a federal representative or senator. So imagine that. Now, what would happen, Britt Hume, if during that riot, one of the representatives or senators, or even one of their aides, was murdered? And before you say, oh, they wouldn't have been murdered, we don't know. You get a mob on somebody, it doesn't take much. Even with your bare hands, you can kill somebody. So they were very close. When Ashley Babbitt, one of the rioters, was shot by a Capitol Police officer, they were something like 40 feet away from senators. That's how close it was. That's why she got shot. If you want to look into that, you can look into that. If you want to debate that, debate that. But that's the justification here, is that she was breaking through a door. There was a gun visible. That's what happened. A woman died. And you're going to act like that's no big deal? We're blowing this out of proportion. I don't think that the plan was very well thought out. No, I don't think they were going to overtake the government. There wasn't enough of them. They didn't have the military with them. So you sort of see that side of the argument. But to downplay it as like no big deal when 6 people died, and then later, after the event, other Capitol Police officers and police officers who were on the scene from D.C. committed suicide. But we're going to act like it's no big deal. There's millions of dollars in damage. It's just, what are you doing? The rest of the country was outraged. Even if you're going to downplay it and twist it and rewrite history, which this Fox News has done ridiculously. But yes, there was an unbelievable clip, and that's why part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So moving on, the same hour on PBS, they added Juliet KM of Harvard Kennedy School and Jessica Hausman of Vote Beat, and they sort of discussed all of this disinformation surrounding, the voting and all of this nonsense. And Stephanie Tsai, a PBS correspondent, was reporting from Maricopa County, Arizona, and she talked about a certain favorite of Decoding Fox News. You'll know. I said Maricopa County, Arizona. A certain favorite who I love to imitate, who wasn't doing so well that night. Didn't do so well. Here we go.
In the 2022 midterms, the Republicans that went up against Democrats who were Trump-endorsed election deniers pretty much all lost. That's why you have in this historically red state the top 3 state offices all held by Democrats now. Now, several of those election deniers in 2022 are running again. For example, Kari Lake, who lost the governor's race, has never conceded that she lost that race, by the way, is in the Arizona Senate race with Democrat Ruben Gallego. She has really played down her election denialism in this election cycle. In fact, I saw that she was asked today whether she would accept the results of this election, and she said she would. So we're not hearing Republican candidates necessarily lead with that in this particular cycle because it was not successful for those candidates.
Now, what Stephanie Tsai said is correct. It was not successful for those candidates. It was not successful for Kari Lake, even though she tried to pull a Trump and just insist that she won. She won court case after court case, and she went on a radio show and said, I'm the duly elected governor of Arizona. I am. I'm Kari Lake. How dare you? I'm not sure what's going to happen to that woman. She might get some sort of cabinet position by Trump. Who knows? She would be hilarious as the press secretary. I mean, it would be a nightmare. It looks like it might be Alina Habba, also a nightmare. But Carrie Lake would be more appropriate since she was a journalist. To give it to a lawyer is totally bizarre. A bad lawyer. But anyway, fun times. It's going to be a complete disaster. And I'm laughing to keep from crying here. I'm laughing to keep from crying. I might lose my health insurance. My student loan payment's probably going to triple. Whatever. Ha 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 ha. Ha. The health insurance is actually far more serious to me. We could deal with the student loans, but health insurance? I'm a self-employed person. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm not 25. I got denied coverage when I was 23. They said it was high risk. Absolute absurdity. So ACA is going to hurt millions of people if they take that away. So anyway, ha ha ha, laughing to keep from crying. Next up, we have hour 4, which I called More Bomb Threats and Third-Party Candidates. On Fox, they added, they had this additional thing called Voters' Voices segment where they had a separate studio and they had a bunch of audience members. And they really barely did anything with this. I felt sorry for those people because they had it wasn't a huge crowd. It was like 20 people, it looked like. And they had Lee Carter, a pollster, and Harris Faulkner in this room where they were just going to talk to voters. I think they talked to like 2 people and then they never went back to them. It was kind of embarrassing, actually. I think they were probably going to use that if the night turned out differently. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a completely wasted segment. Sean Hannity also joined the panel. Kayleigh McEnany, again, Fox News, former Trump administration. Trey Gowdy, Fox News, former congressman. And Pete Hegseth, who now might be our Secretary of Defense. Yeah, okay. So anyway, it's totally insane. So Trey Gowdy brings up third-party candidates, and I thought this was a very interesting clip. Here we go.
Vote for someone who doesn't want to be the president and has asked you not to. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Who are these 0.4% that are voting for someone who has begged you not to vote for him? If you want to see him in Washington, don't vote for him. But it reminds me of Jill Stein. I mean, I think Jill Stein cost Hillary Clinton a state. I know that Ross Perot cost Bush a presidential election. I was in the green room, Brett, doing what I did in high school, which is finding the 2 smartest kids in the class and sitting in between them and looking on their papers. That's McCarthy and Rove. There may be a 269 tie. I know nobody wants to hear that, but there is a scenario under which there will be a topic for this.
Now, Fox will bring this up again in that they talk about third-party candidates. And RFK Jr. especially, they bring him up later. Now, I will say this. In Michigan, which was the state that everybody was worried about because there's a large Muslim population, and Jill Stein was playing to them as if she was going to do something for them. She's not. She will do what she does every time she runs. She criticizes everybody, and then she goes back to her little tower and looks down at everybody and judges them. She doesn't actually govern. She just criticizes. Jill Stein, I'm going to be watching her like a hawk because this time it'll be interesting to see if she disappears again, because I have a feeling that this situation in Israel is not going to get resolved anytime soon, and Trump's going to just be a disaster. And she'll just, oh, la-di-da, she only criticizes Democrats, it seems. But anyway, she did not spoil this election. There was more than 1% between Harris and Trump. She did not get 1% of the vote. She got 0.6% of the vote. There were other third-party candidates on the ballot in Michigan. Some of them were right-leaning. There was a libertarian. And if you put all the votes together, it just wasn't enough. They kind of canceled each other out, the left, the right. They did not. Now, on PBS, we're still in hour 4. They didn't add anybody new to the panel. They had PBS correspondent John Yang reporting again from Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Now, Fox didn't just mention the bomb threats once and drop them. They kept bringing it up. And so he's going to talk about it again with more detail. This is, again, John Yang.
Another thing I want to talk about is the bomb threats. The bomb threats that were started in Georgia now reached Pennsylvania. These were email bomb threats. It affected a number of counties: Bucks County, Chester County, Delaware County and Philadelphia, 9 polling places were hit by, were targeted. In Westchester, the Chester County Government Building, in Luzerne County and Wilkes-Barre, the same thing where they were counting ballots. And that in each of these cases, they did close down for a sweep, but they did secure the ballots, and with sheriffs or police there to make sure that everything was done right.
Moving on to hour 5, which I've labeled more Trump lies, third-party candidates, and some racism. So additional panel members, Charlie Hurt, he's a Fox News contributor, Jesse Waters came back, and Mark Penn, who's a Democratic strategist who loves going on Fox News. Ugh, that man drives me crazy. He's on Fox News all the time. This quote is from a favorite. I imitate this woman. I'm just going to say, she's Miss Alternative Facts. Alternative Facts. You know, I don't understand. I don't understand why everybody's so mean to Trump. Everybody loves him. They just love Trump. If you just hang out with him, you just see he's such a great guy. I'm Kellyanne Conway. Here we go. Miss Kellyanne.
Whose big idea was it to over-prosecute Donald Trump with all these cases? You think a lot of black men in this country didn't stand up and say, I think the system has been against me. I think that's unfair, to say nothing of the fact that they want economic upward mobility like everyone else. They're school choice voters. They think that people coming over the border are taking their jobs. And you got Barack Obama telling them, you're not right. Stop telling us who we are, what we think, how to eat, how to vote.
Okay, that entire quote is bonkers because, number one, why are you saying that black men can relate to a man who's been criminally prosecuted? That's insulting and racist. Number two, then you make this bizarre pivot to upward mobility. What does that have to do with Trump getting criminally prosecuted? Absolutely nothing. Then you say people don't want to be told what to eat. Well, RFK Jr. wants to tell everybody what to eat. That's gotten even worse in the past few days. Okay, and then you say we're going to tell you how we don't want people telling us how to vote. You are on a network that does exactly that 24/7, so sit down and shut your mouth. As I say, just shocking. I was like, how much garbage is in one quick quote there? Wow. Absolutely insane. So next up we have Grady Trimble. He's a Fox News correspondent reporting from Novi, Michigan. And he talks about the Arab Americans, and again, Jill Stein. I think they were really hoping that Jill Stein would be a spoiler, but she wasn't. Here we go.
Like most of the battleground states, this is going to be a story of rural turnout versus urban turnout, but there's an interesting storyline playing out in the Detroit suburbs, particularly in the Dearborn area, in the Arab American community. The Trump campaign has really been targeting that community, trying to get them to either vote for former President Trump, but they don't actually need that. In some cases, we've talked to Arab Americans who are casting their ballots for Green Party candidate Jill Stein, somebody you probably haven't heard mentioned much, but who could be a spoiler candidate. We also know that many Arab Americans are going to sit out this election entirely, which could tip the scales in favor of former President Trump. We're also watching.
Now, it's a lot harder to know when you say when people don't vote, how that threw the election, because you don't know how they were going to vote. So that's like odd. And there were some Muslims who openly supported Trump, which is a level of crazy that I can't even comprehend, because the man has a track record of bigotry towards Muslims. He invented this whole, they were dancing in Jersey City at 9/11. He invented that story and promoted it until he dropped it because people said there's no evidence for it. And people did push back against that nonsense. Just an insidious story. Then he banned Muslims from entering the country. He cut off funding for Palestinians. He declared the Golan Heights for Israel. He moved the capital. He had his ambassador was this crazy person who wanted to annex the occupied West Bank for Israel. And he was pro-settler. You could not get a worse American president for Palestinians than Donald J. Trump, and I'm saying this out loud. So I don't understand Muslims who voted for him. I understand their frustration. That I understand. I understand people's anger, their rage. I get it. And I do not mean to dismiss that. I find it bizarre that you would channel it towards Donald J. Trump, because he doesn't care. He would use the word Palestinian as a slur in his speeches. But whatever. Moving on. Oh my goodness. Oh my god. I just don't understand that. I'm just like, what happened there? What happened there? So no additional guests on Hour 5 on PBS News Hour. They just the same people were there. Again, I don't know how they're functioning, but they were there. This is a quote from Judy Woodruff. This went viral on social media, and you'll see why in a moment. Here we go.
I think it's interesting since he was talking it up when there was a moment, there were weeks during the campaign, in recent weeks, when it looked like Kamala Harris might have some momentum. You hear more of that talk from former President Trump then. So now, does this suggest that he may be winning? He's feeling better, feeling more confident, as William was reporting. So he doesn't need to put those allegations out there, which, by the way, most of or all of which were unfounded. There was no evidence of any fraud that anybody could find. I mean, we've got people all over the country looking in every state and every voting jurisdiction. So what was it based on in the first place?
She's amazing because she handled that so professionally. You can't, I mean, she's not like getting emotional. She's just very like, well, I mean, now that he's winning, it appears that he's winning this election. He's doing very well. These allegations of cheating have fallen away. They're gone. That's interesting. Just Judy Woodruff. That is a career professional. I love watching old clips of her from when she just started out, like in the 70s. It's amazing. She's this tiny little woman too. She's only 5'2", and she's built. My mother's built like her, just itty bitty, tiny, frail, petite person, and yet so powerful, which I love. I'm a big fan of Judy Woodruff. Anyway, next up we go election night, Hour 6, which I've labeled Clueless Voters, Propaganda, and Trump's Rebirth. And Fox, again, PBS doesn't add anybody else to their panel from here on out. They just didn't. Much lower budget show. Fox News, additional panel members. They added Ben Domenech of the Spectator World, editor-in-chief. Kevin O'Leary, again, Canadian businessman and investor. Richard Fowler, he's a liberal on Fox News. Katie Pavlich of Fox News. And then they had a West Coast panel. These guys came on after the 9 hours. I didn't watch any of it because I knew it would not be what I wanted, because I couldn't really compare that to Fox. I knew it would just be opinion, them gloating, so I didn't bother. 9 hours is enough. It was Trace Gallagher of Fox News, Steve Hilton, a conservative political commentator, Kaylee McGee-White of the Steamboat Institute, Gianno Caldwell, Fox News political analyst, Jody Moore, he's a law professor with the University of Southern California. And then Britt Hume has this great quote about Donald J. Trump.
That issue that Donald Trump is a bad guy worked for them in 2020 in particular. I mean, people tell me all the time, no way Joe Biden got 80 million votes. I kind of agree with that. I think Donald Trump got those 80 million votes for Joe Biden. In the passage of time and with the record of the Biden administration, those concerns faded. And while I think a lot of people voted for him, like the voters you described, without much enthusiasm for him, but in definitely thinking it was a better deal back then than they are getting from this administration and have gotten from this administration. And if he wins tonight, it'll be the fact that they look back on his administration more fondly than they ever might have thought they could even 2 years ago.
We've said it.
Again, this goes back to my theory that this was kind of related to COVID. People just wanted to put COVID in the past and act like it didn't happen. And Trump played on that because he blatantly lied to them. He acted like his administration was so glorious and perfect and wonderful. I was in New York. I remember 800 deaths a day. I remember corpse trucks. I remember mass graves on Hart Island. I remember just absolute chaos, people freaking out. I mean, it's 8.4 million people in this city, or 8.3 million, whatever. But to have 800 people every single day die, I checked the numbers every day because it was my way of coping with it. I just needed data. I needed information. And it was devastating to live through that. It was devastating. Sirens all day long, morning, noon, night. And then this idiot would come on the television and say, oh, drink bleach or ingest bleach or a disinfectant. Would that do something? And I'm just losing it. That's what we were dealing with. That's what we were living. And I think people have just blocked it out, and they just want to go back to this happier time when and we didn't have inflation and all. It's just, I think it's part of it. That's the only thing I will say. I'm not going to criticize Democrats because goodness, I have no idea. So next up, we have also, this is hour 6. This is Jonathan Capehart, and he discusses the power and influence of Fox News.
Which gets to a point I wanted to make, which is in terms of people getting their news, there's a whole right-wing echo chamber that amplifies all of the misinformation and disinformation that's going out there to the American people. And Fox News, the cable channel, the #1 cable channel in the country by multiples. When I look at my ratings for my show on MSNBC, I don't even bother to see if I beat Fox. I look to see if I beat CNN because Fox is way out ahead, and that's where people are getting their news.
And Jonathan Capehart is 100% correct. 100% correct. And when people kind of look, because I have to deal with like snobbery in journalism, and there are some folks who kind of look down on what I do because they're like, what, you just watch TV? And I'm like, you have no idea what I do. And you could never do it. You could never do it because you couldn't stomach it. But yeah, sometimes I deal with that. It happens. I don't really care. I just go, whatever. But there's also kind of this attitude of, I get this a lot. People go, oh, you're elevating them by, pointing out when they say horrible things. And I go, elevating them? Check the ratings for Fox News. Get back to me. Tell me I'm elevating them. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm not elevating them. I'm criticizing them. And more people need to be doing what I'm doing. We need 10 Aaron Rupars and 10 Asins along with me and 10 Kat Abus, okay? Or Abaguzala. I like to say her real name. Her full name, I should say. But we need like 10 of us doing this. And Media Matters, give Media Matters more money. I want, 50 people at Media Matters doing this work because it's just constant. We need to push back as often as possible. Next up, we have Jeff Bennett. And this is it's a great example of why we need more people out there doing this. Jeff Bennett, this quote is gold. I don't want to give it away. Again, we're still in hour 6.
To your point, I was looking at some of the search terms today to get a sense of what people were thinking about ahead of the results coming in. And one of the search terms was, did Joe Biden drop out? Imagine being a voter and learning on election day that Joe Biden isn't the Democratic nominee. But that's the reality for a lot of people.
And those aren't folks necessarily watching Fox News. Those are folks that just don't check in. Now, luckily for Democrats, those people don't vote at all during the midterms for the most part. The people who vote during the midterms, and I'm saying this to give everybody hope, the people who vote in the midterms are the nerds, are the people who watch everything, the people who know everything backward and forward, the people who can rattle off who's in the cabinet, who can rattle off bills by name, by number. I'm telling you, those are the folks who vote in the midterms, and that's why you tend to see dramatic swings in the midterms. Now, sadly, it's 2 years away. It's 2 years away. But I have hope and I have faith. That's all I got to say. I have a feeling it's going to be a total disaster. Hopefully we'll survive it. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I don't want to depress everybody. Moving on. Hour 7, which I've named Trump the Victim President and More Fox Influence. Fox added some additional panel members. Darren Shaw. He is the Fox News Decision Desk. They discussed why they called things earlier than other networks and their whole method. They also had Representative Kevin McCarthy, again from California. He's the representative, used to be the Speaker of the House. Juan Williams, Fox News liberal, one of my favorites. I don't get to see him as much because he's more on the legit news shows. Mark Thiessen, he's got the quote of the entire event coming up. And Jessica Tarloff, everybody's favorite, the Fox News liberal. She didn't really get to say much. A lot of people didn't get to say much. They just kept bringing people out, and then they'd be, okay, next up, and there you go. This quote is from Kellyanne Conway, again, painting Trump as a victim, which is bizarre to me. Here we go.
Then I think the Democrats have to think thrice about this lawfare strategy that they have put on his shoulders like an anvil. They really thought that would get rid of him. No one's been more insulted, investigated, impeached, indicted, convicted, take his name off the buildings, take him out of his family business, take his name off the ballot. You name it, they tried it. Oh, and the assassin's bullets, of course. You name it, they tried it. I would think thrice if I were them. I wonder this, is there a Democrat in the Senate or the House that he can rely upon to help get his agenda through. None of them voted for the Tax Cut and Jobs Act the first time. It's benefited all of their districts in some form or fashion. There's no question.
I mean,
so I have no idea why she kept repeating thrice. That was just weird. And again, she does this stupid repetition of they tried to kill him. Who's they? Because two people, and one of them was a registered Republican. So no, they didn't try to kill anybody. And sadly, the person who did take a shot at President Trump was also planning to take a shot at Biden. There was evidence of that. He was just a crazy person, and sadly, like in many cases, people who shoot the president don't necessarily do so for political reasons. The person who shot President Reagan did not do so for political reasons. He was trying to impress Jodie Foster. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. It's not always rational, and certainly not they. So that's ridiculous. So we're going to move on to Juan Williams, who dared to bring up January 6th while sitting next to Brit Hume. So this is entertaining to say the least.
To my mind, it seems to me incredible that a guy who led a insurrection against the United States government is potentially now, like a phoenix, going back into the Oval Office. Right. It's unbelievable.
Right. Well, you have to consider the fact, Juan, that a lot of people didn't think that was an insurrection. They thought it was a riot, but not an insurrection. And had they thought it was really an insurrection, I don't think he could have won.
Well,
I
don't know.
The exaggerations about that day.
Well, I'm not exaggerating.
About the alleged threat to democracy is a piece of what happened tonight.
Well, I don't think so. I think, again, I'm giving you my perspective.
Yeah. And I'm giving you mine.
Right. So I listened to you as my friend. But I'm going to tell you what I saw was not only a riot in terms of the violence, but a direct action intended to stop certification of a presidential election.
Understood. And we've talked a lot about it.
That's why I said that.
Now, I don't know, but based on the timing of that, it sounds like somebody was in Brett's ear telling him to get Juan Williams to shut up. Because the fact that the co-anchor of the entire night just abruptly goes, yeah, moving on. It's basically what happened there. Next up, this is also from Hour 7. We're moving to PBS. This is David Brooks. He discussed why incumbents all over the world lost their elections because of this global problem with inflation and interest rates, which that's how most wealthy economies try to tackle inflation, is that they raise interest rates, which makes it more expensive to borrow money. All kinds of, I won't get into monetary policy, but that is basically what happened. And this was also discussed on that Pod Save America episode, which I highly recommend. Look for it. It was published it was 16 hours is what I could tell. When I watched it, was like 16 hours old. So it was like published right after the election. I saw it on YouTube, but you can get it on any sort of podcast. And again, listen to Dan Pfeiffer. Because he discusses it at length. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in this. And I'll play the clip.
The one element I'd add in here is the international element. If you look at ruling parties pretty much across the world, they've all been shellacked. The post-COVID inflation hit the whole world, or at least the industrialized countries, and ruling parties in the Netherlands and Portugal, Latin America, they've all been hit. And in our country, I'd say most of the inflation was caused just by COVID supply chain, but maybe a third was caused by the Biden administration overstimulating the economy. But the voters don't really care about that. They just think there's inflation, and so we're really mad about it. And then in a deeper level, not just inflation, if you ask people all around the world, Ipsos asked people all around the world, is your country in decline? 60-odd% said, yeah, our country is in decline. Do you trust experts in your country to relate to people like you? 65% say, don't trust experts. What's unusual is America is usually an outlier nation, but we are absolutely typical in distrust of authority, in feeling the system is broken, elites don't get people like us. The whole world is going through a climate, not the whole world, but at least the Western democracies, that are just extremely hospitable to right-wing populism.
But France was one outlier on that, right? And when they did win in that coalition, there was progressive populism there, like obviously a big strike of sanitation workers in that country that led to it. And I think, as you say that, and I agree with all of that, there was a glimmer of how you could go. I would also add that it's sad for me because, and I assume for you, that the United States was the outlier also of having the least amount of impact from inflation, having the fastest recovery post-COVID. COVID, getting back up on our feet. To this day, the facts and the stats are there that we have outperformed every other nation in dealing with this challenge, and unfortunately, not rewarded policy.
America was also the outlier in not having political violence on the level we did until January 6th, and now this democracy is no longer immune from that as well. But
So that's Faz Shakir, and I will say this, the panel on PBS was a little inconsistent on how they kept pronouncing his first name. Some people called him Fez, some people said more Faz. I'm not really sure, and I apologize if I'm getting it wrong, because I was confused. But his last name is Shakir, we can at least get that correct. He's the Democrat political strategist. He had great insight. I thought that comment was wonderful, and again, you'll hear that if you listen to it sounds like I'm working for them. I'm not. But Pod Save America had great analysis. I just loved how because I watched other podcasts and I've seen other analysis of like what went wrong. And what I really liked about the Pod Save America, and again, I'm not working for them. I've never had any interaction with them personally other than on Twitter, is it was very calm and it wasn't emotional and people screaming and yelling and getting all worked up. It was very like, well, this is what happened and, yada, yada, yada. It was just, I liked that delivery because, we're all just so stressed out and we don't need more stress, in my opinion. Okay, not to waste too much time on that. But so Shakir, the Democratic strategist, is going to come back to Trump's relationship with Fox News. And this insight is amazing because I thought, when I heard this, and again, when I went through these, I went hour by hour by hour. So I'd go back and forth between these two networks. I cut them up, I put them in Premiere Pro, and went hour 1, hour 1, hour 2, hour 2, hour 3, hour 3, to really get kind of how they were at the same points of time. And this comment was like a light bulb over my head of like, that's why the folks over in the legit news department at Fox don't look that excited, because trust me, Hannity couldn't hold it in. Hannity was over the moon. But some of his Fox cohorts did not look that excited. Here it is.
One point I'd just make, literally this morning, when Trump was speaking, as he was, I think after he voted, he attacked Fox News. He said Fox News should be ashamed of themselves. They aren't pro-Trump at all, was his quote. And I think part of what you're seeing, Fox News seeing a little bit of the writing on the wall, wanting to ingratiate themselves back over with Trump and be the first ones to call it for him, tells you a little bit about how the conservative ecosystem might work under Donald Trump.
So I did not know that happened. And Shakir saying that on air on PBS was like enlightening to me, because I'm like, well, that might explain. Because again, we don't know what Trump has said to Rupert Murdoch. I do know that in the past 2 weeks, because Harris Faulkner said on air Joe Biden won the 2020 election, and she corrected Trump after his press conference, that there might be a concerted effort to just knock it off because they don't want more lawsuits. And we just have to stick to the truth here. I don't know. But we do know that Trump had this habit of complaining about Fox, complaining about the legitimate news people specifically. And if Trump had his way, everybody would be Sean Hannity and Jesse Waters. And it would be one big celebration of how wonderful Trump is. And that's it. And who knows? We might get that. I don't know. But I think this sort of explains why I didn't see smiling faces on election night. I saw somber faces. I'm not kidding. Except for, again, Sean Hannity and Jesse Waters and a few others. So this is, we're on hour 8 last night, the last hour. It's actually, in the case of Fox, it was actually 8 and 9, but who cares? Because there's about a half-hour difference between the two networks. And I labeled this hour, What Will Happen with a Second Trump Presidency? And we have additional panel members. They brought on the West Coast panel again, which is Trace Gallagher, Steve Hilton, Kaylee McGee-White, Gianna Caldwell, and Joni Amore. Mark Penn showed up again. He's a Democratic strategist. Kevin O'Leary, he's the Canadian businessman and investor. And Mark Thiessen, the Washington Post, he's a conservative columnist. He has a great quote, which we're about to hear. It was the quote of the whole night for me. And this is Kellyanne Conway talking about a story. What's funny about this, I didn't catch it until I listened to this a couple of times, and I went, wait a second. She's telling a story about how she worked for Trump, and Hillary Clinton conceded, and this is like a whole moment. And again, she makes Trump into a permanent victim yet again. But she says something very funny that's kind of ridiculous, where she goes, on this phone, Hillary, this very phone, Hillary Clinton called me. She called me. She was like, hey, Kellyanne Conway, I'm conceding. Now, it wasn't that phone because that phone would be 8 years old. And call me crazy, Kellyanne Conway, I bet you have replaced your iPhone 7 or 6 or whatever that would even be. I had an iPhone 7 up until April of this year, so I know how old that phone. It would be like an iPhone 5, I think. It would be like crazy if it was 8 years old. Anyway, just a little detail that I noticed of Miss Alternative Facts. Alternative Facts. Here we go.
Say this, it's on this phone that Huma Abedin placed the call 2:30 a.m. on November 9th, 2016. And on the other line was Secretary Clinton to concede the race to Donald Trump on my phone. I handed it to him, and I said to Vice President-elect Mike Pence, make sure Hillary actually concedes. She did. And President Trump was gracious to them, too. Yep. They came to the luncheon at the Capitol after the inauguration. The Obamas and the Clintons were there. I was there to see it myself. And then something just changed. The Washington Post said, let's impeach him at noon, 2 minutes after he's inaugurated. Melania wrote about this in her book. So, Harold, I hear you. I hope everybody can unify. But I got to tell you, my friend, I think it starts with your party and not mine.
Fair enough.
They had this guy in a courtroom. He's not an indoor cat. I get it.
Talk about making up reality. Oh, wow. Miss Alternative Facts. Every time I post anything about her, people comment every single time Alternative Facts. She did that to herself. That is her legacy. That is what she will be known as forever. Everything else, she had other accomplishments, but she's never going to escape Alternative Facts because it was absolutely obnoxious. I'm not going to waste time on that because it's obvious how outrageous that is. Next up, we move on to, this is the quote of the entire event. Mark Thiessen, he gave me some great quotes at the midterms when he was melting down. But this was just, what? Again, we're just making up reality here. Mark Thiessen, here we go.
Why is she not speaking tonight? She lost. She just go to bed? I mean, the Wisconsin's called. It's over. Why is she not coming out and conceding? It's shameful.
The whole thing was that he was going to say he won when he didn't really win, or not concede if he lost.
Right. Yeah.
And now here we are.
There's a little bit more to that story. Fox called the election for Trump before anybody else did. Nobody else had called it yet. And they addressed this on PBS. They flat out said, Fox called this. Nobody else has called this. We're not calling this. PBS gets their info on voting from the AP, the Associated Press, which is like the gold standard. And they're like, we're not budging. It does look bad for Harris, but we're not calling it yet because we don't have the data. And that was the right call. That's the right way to handle it. Fox was assured, confident in their own process and their own people. They went ahead and called it. It is reasonable that Harris would not make a concession call at that point. I think so. She also did immediately the next day, like in the morning when people were actually paying attention and watching, she made a concession speech and it's done. Okay. So, and hello. And this is why I just went, shut your mouth. Again, that's one of my phrases. Shut your mouth. What are you doing? It is the year 2024. We've gone through an entire election cycle, and Donald J. Trump still has not conceded that he lost the 2020 election. So when we are dealing with that reality, Mark Thiessen, how dare you? It is shameful for you to pretend that we are in another reality, because believe it or not, 81 million people who voted for Joe Biden do not like being gaslit by an entire party and an entire right-wing ecosystem that just makes up things and then just insists that they're true. We're fed up and we're sick of it. And no, Kellyanne Conway, we're not going to come to this table apologizing when that man calls us sick, twisted monsters and evil, which is what he does, and then threatens the press. Shut your mouth. Next up, oh my goodness, I'm getting worked up. I'm telling you, we're going to go through some stuff. So next up, Brett Baer. We're very close to the end here. Brett Baer brings up Thanksgiving. I thought this one was also unintentionally hilarious.
But there are a lot of Thanksgiving tables that people are still going to have hard feelings after this election,
Absolutely.
more than any other election.
I have one of them.
And if passing the Brussels sprouts is not going to be as easy Thanksgiving Day. But this is a chance to move forward, Brett. Go ahead.
Again, it's very difficult to move forward when you just make stuff up and just bully us to agree to your false reality. That's not fun for us, number two. There's been a lot of damage done by this man. That's not going to get wiped away. And, oh, by the way, I don't know if your last name is Hernandez and you have some, that's the most common, one of the most common surnames in America, by the way. It's weird. It's in the top 10. Hernandez, that's why I pulled it out, thin air. But Hernandez, I think it's number 8. Why do I know this? Because I won't even get into why I know this, but it's like number 8. Check it. Check to see if I'm right. Hernandez. I say Hernandez because the largest group of undocumented immigrants in the United States are from Central America and Mexico. Not all of them, of course. We have undocumented immigrants from all over the world in this country. But let's just say, because there are, I know of many families where you've got some immigrants who are legally here with relatives who are not legally here. That is quite common, especially with a large extended family. So yeah, Thanksgiving might be rough if you are a Latino person who voted for Trump and you have relatives that could face deportation. That might be rough. That's kind of ugly. It might be rough if you have a relative who has a pre-existing condition, who can only get health insurance thanks to the ACA, who now faces the reality that they could lose that health insurance to a lunatic who says he has a concept of a plan to replace the ACA. So yes, yeah, it might be a little rough. Might be a little rough if you have a relative who is trans, who's now terrified of what will happen to them. You might have a relative who had an abortion. You might have a relative who had a pregnancy complication. You might have a relative who is who's got a same-sex partner, a same-sex spouse, and Jonathan Capehart addresses that in a moment. You might have a relative who works for the federal government who's worried they're going to lose their job. I could just go on and on and on and on. So yeah, passing the Brussels sprouts might be a little rough this year. Oh my goodness, it's going to be anyway, laughing to keep from crying. Really, I truly am. Next up, we have Faz Shakir. We're back to PBS, the Democratic strategist. He discussed what his second Trump presidency might look like. Here we go.
And what we learned from the first Trump presidency, it was really critical to have however many voices there were who would be willing to tell him no and stand up to him. But they made very clear early, throughout the course of the campaign, this time, no room for those people. And I don't know who he's going to select. Obviously, it'll be a major point, assuming he does win. We'll all be focused who's the chief of staff, who's going to be filling out the major departments. And I think one of the questions is, are these just acolytes? J.D. Vance, for instance, still can't tell you whether Trump won or lost the 2020 election. I mean, that's the level of acolyteism we're dealing with here. And does that become a threshold question for everybody to join this cabinet or not? Do they allow in anyone who has a different point of view? Take Sean O'Brien, for instance. Here's a labor leader. Do you bring him into the fold? Is he allowed to have a role? I don't know.
That's another thing I'm going to be checking on with Trump, because who knows what's going to happen with labor strikes in the next 2 years and how he's going to handle them. But I have a feeling he's going to be letting Sean O'Brien down. I will say briefly, because I have a father who was in a union. It was hardcore union. He went on strike in the 70s. It was rough for my entire family. We had it just drilled into us, organized labor is good for Americans. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but very, very pro-union family. And I will say this, when I was discussing the RNC with some of my family members, this was crazy. All of them were like, I couldn't watch that man. Could not. I had to walk away because they were so angry that he spoke at the RNC and the way he did so and the things he said. They were just livid. So that'll be interesting. Next up, I gave the last clip of the night, and I do have some analysis of the words because these were very close in length, because PBS doesn't have commercials and Fox does, even though they weren't exactly the same length. I was like, it's close enough. Let's compare them. Sorry, my cat's making noise. They're getting annoyed with me because this is going on for over an hour. Odin is up on the desk. Thor is knocking stuff around. We're holding on for dear life over here at Decoding Fox News, the newsroom of one, the podcast of one. There is no team, no producer. Final word for election night coverage is from the one, the only Jonathan Capehart, who just puts it perfectly. This is brilliant. Here we go.
To William's point, I'm part of the other half of the country who's shocked, given all of the things that Kevin said. But to be honest, there's also a part of me that's not shocked. I mean, for a lot of people, this will be 2016 all over again. And for me, it's not. Because, I lived through the 4 years of Trump's administration. I remember what that was like. And I just have to say that this is a sobering moment for me as an African American, because things that he said on the campaign trail about giving power to police to do all sorts of things that would loop me in potentially to being have an encounter with the police that I didn't ask for. As a gay American, I'm concerned because that's the conservative supermajority on the court, particularly Justice Thomas, in his concurrence with the Dobbs decision, said, you know what, we should go after Obergefell, which legalized same-sex marriage. So my marriage is on the line. As a journalist, I'm concerned because just 2 days ago, he talked about how I've got this piece of glass in front of me, and so if someone wants to shoot me, they have to shoot through the press, and that might not be so bad. But also as an American, I'm concerned because of what we've done to help the people of Ukraine, what President Biden has tried to do in bringing a resolution to the Israel-Hamas war, America's standing in the world, our role in NATO, in the Western Alliance, being the bulwark of democracy.
That's a pro. That's a man who's been doing this for a long time. He's so good at what he does. So, brilliant. You just summed it up, but much better than I could. You nailed it. So I did a word analysis of the Fox transcript and the PBS transcript, and this was comical because they're both so huge. The files were enormous. I had to cut these things up and cut them up and then do each transcript separately and stick them together. It was nuts. So here we go. Trump, the word Trump was used 507 times on Fox, 543 times on PBS, so almost identical. Harris, another one that was freaky, 263 times on Fox, 292 times on PBS. I also noticed something that was very interesting. Suddenly, people were referring to her as Harris on Fox, not Kamala, which they've been doing, which is why I checked for Harris, because they'd also say Kamala Harris, so it's a better gauge. PBS has consistently been doing that. The word woke for Fox, 6 times, because that's a big deal. PBS, 0. The word, this was very interesting, deportation showed up Fox, 0. PBS, 10. Border, Fox, 25 times. PBS, 9. Black, as in black voter, black men. Fox, 54 times. PBS, 39. Latino Hispanic, Fox, 46 times. PBS, 19. I thought that was interesting because Fox is always complaining about identity politics, and they were doing it. Women, 38 times on Fox, 61 times on PBS. Israel, freakishly almost the same. 3 Fox, 4 PBS. Ukraine, exactly the same. 5 times on both networks. Pennsylvania, 153 times for Fox, 122 times for PBS, so eerily similar as well. Working class, Fox, 11 times. PBS, 39 times. Democracy, Fox, 30. PBS, 25, very similar. Hitler, the word Hitler, Fox, 5 times. PBS, 0. Fascist, Fox, 5. PBS, 3. Assassination, Fox, 13 times. Again, assassination, 13 times for Fox. For PBS, 4. And the word kill, as they're going to kill him, 6 for Fox. PBS, 0. I didn't look up trans because the words, and this is frustrating, but TRAN is common in a lot of words. So when you look up trans, it just shows up all over the place. It's very difficult to differentiate when that's trans for transgender or transition or all these other words that it shows up in. And I would have looked up transgender, but people on Fox usually just say trans. So that's kind of that one was wonky. I didn't really know how to look that up because I was like, that's going to take these are 9-hour transcripts. So you're talking like hundreds of words it shows up. There's some words that are very problematic like that because the way the search works, it doesn't let you just look up, no, I just want trans by itself. It looks it up in everything that the letters that are in that order together. Anyway, that's it. That's the podcast. I will be doing the weekly podcast later tonight, and that will get published as soon as humanly possible. The rest of the week I'm taking off for my own mental health and sanity. I will probably be doing a Pete Hegseth special for next week, where the weekly podcast would normally go. I also don't think that much is going to happen this week with any of this because it's just gloat time over at Fox. So again, thank you so much for listening. If you've made it all an hour and 11 minutes right now, you're amazing. You're a trooper. Thank you so much. If you'd like to become a supporter of Decoding Fox News, I always need your help. Please go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. I also have a Venmo, and that link I'm going to be putting in more places now because somebody said, I don't normally mention it, and somebody thanked me for it specifically, sent me a private email, said thank you because it's just easy to give you like a one-time hit, and that's good, and I can help you out your project. It's just easier. I said, oh, okay. He said, keep mentioning it. I said, okay, I'll do it. And if you'd like to see my work, even though there's a huge exodus over at Twitter, also known as X, I'm still there. I will stay there. I'm just going to try to be putting more stuff on Threads and Blue Sky, which I'm also at. You can also find work on Instagram, not so much on TikTok, but I do post there, YouTube, and I have a fan page on Facebook. I think I got them all. I'm exhausted. My mascots, Odin and Thor, send their love. They are cats. I will be giving this to Resolute Square. They should be putting this on their YouTube channel, hopefully, who knows. And that's about it. I will see you at the next podcast. Thanks for listening.
Resolute Square.